Welcome to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. Our guest today knows what he's writing about. As a naval intelligence officer with the U.S. Pacific Command, in multiple deployments in the Persian Gulf and Far East, no less, MP Woodward worked alongside U.S. Special Forces, CIA, and NSA. Really good news is he's used that knowledge to produce the first book in a hopeful, thrilling new series. The title is The Handler, in which a disgraced former CIA operative must go back in the field with only his ex-wife as his handler. And as they say, complications ensue. We're very pleased to welcome MP Woodward.
Hey, Roger, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, as a naval intelligence officer with the Pacific Command, you scripted scenario moves and counter moves for U.S. war games. This is like a course in how to write.
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate at the time. U.S. Pacific Command for the United States Security Establishment really covers about half the world, and it's a joint command, meaning that it's all the different military branches, and it touches a lot of different countries. And so, in my job there as an intelligence officer, at one point, I was on the admiral's staff and was tasked with helping to come up and then populate these scenarios that we would use for exercises. And they were everything from, big war games with real world war threats to lesser things that we don't tend to think a lot about with respect to the military, but things like evacuations and natural disasters and those kinds of things. So for someone like me who'd always been interested in writing, I, of course, really enjoyed the work. And it was a very kind quirk of fate for me.
All right. One of the delights of the book, for those of us who live in the Northwest, is that there are really good action scenes set in Washington State, near Cle Elum and Roslyn, and you mentioned Bellingham and Anacortes and other places. But it also jumps to Mumbai and Washington, D.C., and a sheep farm in Iran. It goes all over the place. How do you keep all that straight when you're writing?
Well, so the plot was really formed from my former life as an intelligence officer, and then conceived in my later life as an executive with Amazon who knew something about entertainment and what makes a good story. So I wanted all those international locales, but the reality is it was written really during COVID. And so while my workaday world was in Seattle, like everybody else at Amazon, like everybody else, we went through a shutdown, and I found myself living up in a cabin that I have up in the Cascade Mountains east of Seattle on the sunny side in the town of Cle Elum. And I really wanted to populate in that in the book. And sure enough, those things just kind of jumped off the page. And so that was really me kind of living some of that life at the time during COVID.
Oh, I love it. Now, this is identified as the first in a series. Does this feel like a trilogy or an ongoing character? Are we going to see more of our lead protagonists?
Yeah, so that was a precondition actually of the book getting published, was that they wanted it as a series, which makes sense, right? In the content world, they want to invest in something and create something of a franchise. So I knew all that going in. So not long after I finished this one, I started the second one and just recently finished that. And I'm just now beginning the outlines and the early makings of the third one. And it involves the same family and some of the other characters, but of course it's different geopolitical contexts.
Yeah, we'll see Meredith and John primarily.
For sure, yeah.
Okay, all right. I always enjoy Tom Clancy level acronyms, and my favorite from this book is SCIF, Secure Compartmented Information Facility, i.e. the cone of silence from the old Get Smart, where you can go and have safe conversations. Is that a real thing? Or real?
It is a real thing, and it's not anything that's secret, right? You hear people talk about it, but a SCIF, as you mentioned, Secure Compartmented Information Facility. And it was useful as a writer as a way to get characters involved where people couldn't really spy on them, and they had to check their phones and watches outside the door. And so that ratcheted up the tension in that they kind of didn't have anything going on with the outside world, had to focus on that conversation. And it also cut off any intercepts that foreign adversaries might have been able
Right.
to get. So that was how I used my skiffs as a plot device. But yes, they're a real thing.
Okay, cool. And one of the things that I enjoy is the fact there's a whole lot of tradecraft in this, and that's been noted by some other people. In fact, this just came out, I think, on the 31st of May, if I'm not mistaken, and you're already getting great reviews.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the book came out on the 31st of May. As a new author, I didn't really know it would work this way, but there had already been reviews out there through things called NetGalley, and so I had already been getting a sense of what people liked and what they didn't like, or the kinds of people that would like the book, and I've certainly seen that in spades at this point.
Great. You got some great quotes too. I think Mark Rainey said some nice things about it, which is really nice to have that as well. I also like things that are a little interesting insights, and you're very good at this. And I want to quote a couple of sentences back at you, which is kind of scary. But one of the things, and both of them that I really like have to do with Meredith. And at one point, you said she removed her backpack, sat under the tree, her back against the trunk, stretching her hamstrings, crunching against the frozen grass. That's a tactile and a sound piece that is from observations. And you must have done that at some time.
Yeah, I think all writers probably do that, but when I'm right, I imagine it's this way for other people. When I'm writing, it's something of a trance. You are completely out of your daily world, and you've kind of fallen through the looking glass. And the things that you're describing are really just sort of like how I think I would be
Mm-hmm.
feeling them, or more accurately, how I think that character would be feeling them at that time.
There's one more I just have to quote because it's a kind of an aha moment for me. Again, she's talking about using her night vision goggles, and she said she was able to see the wintry landscape in shades of green, punctuated by the black dots of snowflakes falling in front of her like static. I never thought about that. What would a snowflake look like in a night vision goggle? And obviously, that's what it looks like. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. And there's a lot. I realized in sort of later you read, when the book finally came out, I'm listening to the Audible version for the first time, and I'm like, wow, a lot of this takes place in the mountains in the snow, and I mean things you'd almost forgotten, and you're like, well, yeah, that's because you were in Clay Elum in January when you were writing this, and the snow was a very real thing. So some of that stuff just felt very visceral to me.
Yeah, and it really connects with the readers. I appreciate that a great deal. And as an old science fiction fan, I give you extra bonus points for use of grokking at some point from Mr. Heinlein. Thanks you. And in a couple of other cultural references, you make a HAL 9000 reference at one point and that sort of thing. But I have to get back to the bigger picture. One of the things I like to ask people who are embarking on series is if they have an endpoint in mind, like the final scene written ahead of time.
Good question. I have a vision for what I want to say in the series. Another word for that is theme, and I want to kind of be able to show that over and over again in various different points of view. I wouldn't say that I have a full-on endpoint, but maybe I'll start thinking about it based on your question. I'm
Sometimes
hoping that the end is still a ways in the future.
15 or 20 out at least. Let's think at least Jack Reacher length of stuff or Tom Clancy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Also, you mentioned some brand names that send me looking because I don't deal in the high end stuff of the Panera watch or the Zegna suit or any of that sort of thing. But when you do look them up and they do correspond, it feels that much more real to people. That do you have a really active imagination, or is all of this dredged from your experience?
I do have an active imagination. It's probably as much a help as it is a hindrance in certain things that you do. But I've been fortunate to have a life that's brought me in contact with very diverse set of people. Everything from kind of the lower echelons to corporate boardrooms and conference rooms with senior admirals and senior policymakers. And so I tried to bring little details from each of those people's lives that I've noticed personally across my professional career.
Yeah, and there is a lot of conflict internally, because this is not one of those, everything goes beautifully in a police procedural or something. This is real people fighting, particularly in government jobs where there's pecking orders and there are rivalries and whatnot. And not just in the good guys, but several sets of people in other places doing that. That must have been fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was something that I wanted to show from the beginning, that all these are real people who have competing emotions, who are worried about things like political hierarchies and covering their own asses and all the kinds of stuff that anyone in a large bureaucracy has to deal with. And I particularly wanted to show that point of view for the antagonists, for the people that were from Russia and from Iran, and to show that, they're human too. And they've got those same things going on in their lives. They might have a different worldview than we do, but when they go to undertake the actions that they do, I wanted the reader to be able to sympathize with them a little bit and think, I can see why that guy would do that, even though I don't agree with him and I kind of hope he fails. It certainly makes sense to me that emotionally why he would be so wrapped up in this. And that was something that was important for me to convey as a novelist.
Right, no cardboard characters here. These are 3D people here. Absolutely, I love that. One of the things I also want to mention real quickly is the title, because the handler, you think this is the primary relationship between Meredith and John, but there are also other people being handled by other people in all these other agencies, and it really gets kind of meta after a while, and I love that about it.
Well, thank you. That's you're the first person to point that out, by the way, because the handler is the word handler is something that's used in tradecraft, of course, where you have an asset and then a case officer handles that person and they call themselves a handler. But I also wanted to convey that the lead character's name is Meredith, that she's handling a lot in her life, and she's handling her husband, she's handling all kinds of things. And then there's other people, the antagonists and the other people in the organization. They're all trying to handle big messes as well. So the title really relates back to Meredith, but it was meant to mean a bit more than just the classic tradecraft term.
I appreciate that. We're just about out of time. I just want to ask if there anything you want to make sure that we our listeners know before we close it out. Website, blog, any of that sort?
Yeah, you bet. You can follow me on mpwoodward.com. That has all my social links there. On Twitter, it's mpw author. And I won't bore you with Facebook and Instagram, but they are out there too. If you go to mpwoodward.com, you can find all those links.
I really want to thank you for your time today and for a wonderful book. Our guest today has been P Woodward. The book is The Handler, highest possible recommendation. Thank you so much.
Hey, I really appreciate it. Take care.